Hello, and welcome back to me doing a set review for Phyrexia All Will Be One. It's me, the guy. I'm the guy doing the set review. Yeah, so this video is going to be the blue cards. All the blue cards. Rares, mythics, uncommons, commons, all of them, all the things that are blue. And we're going to be going over what they're doing in this set. First, I'll go over the tier system. Of course, I am covering up a little bit of text there, which does not matter. You will not need to know what the text says. It's a secret. But essentially, this is how I intend to rate the cards in this video and other card rating videos that I do. Generally, there's four tiers. Tier 1 is the good stuff. Tier 4 is the bad stuff. I don't really see reason to delineate between like the really good stuff and like the really absurd stuff. I think that putting the really absurd stuff in its own tier kind of just like doesn't really matter. Like I don't really care about all that stuff. It sort of is like it's like we all know there's like a ranking or whatever. Like we can go on 17 lands, but like sort of yeah, I think it's just unnecessary to have like a tier 0 or whatever for like, oh, this card's absurd. Like whatever. Anyways, without further ado, if you want to like read more about what the tiers mean, technically, you can read it. Feel free to pause. I'm not going to like go over all of it. I think that's be a little boring and whatnot. All right into the cards here. Aspirant's Ascent. Single blue mana for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+3 and gains flying and toxic 1. Oh, this is enticing. This is an enticing one. If you played Kaldheim, this is basically just a strict upgrade from the white Wings of the Cosmos. And that card's fine, playable. I think this is obviously better than that card. But the fact that it gives Toxic 1 is very nice. It's a very nice thing to have on a card that also gives flying. So you can use it aggressively. In blue specifically, the most important poison counter is poison counter number 1. And so this helps you get poison counter number 1. I'm very high on cards that get poison counter number 1 on the opponent because it makes all your proliferate stuff very, very good. So, yeah, I mean, that's just sort of my take on this trick. It's a nice little combat trick. It can save you. It's like got lots of different avenues for where it can be good and do something. So, I like it. I like it in tier 3. It's not bad. It's like serviceable. It's fine. Next, Atmosphere Surgeon, 1 in a blue for 2/1. When you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, or remove an oil counter from it. Target creature gains flying until end of turn. You can only activate it as a sorcery, so you can't block, and yeah, you can't like do cool whatever stuff with this. I don't know, I'm pretty out on this card. This is very similar to the Air Marshal from last set. There are situations in which it will be better, there are situations in which it will be worse. Air Marshal wasn't especially great, so this is an upgrade, but how much of an upgrade? Like, Air Marshal was like tier 4 unless you were playing Soldier, like specifically Soldier Tribal. Like, this is like... I'm like there are better ways to use your counters, right? Like your oil, like your proliferate cards. There's better stuff to do than this, you know? I think this is a thing that you can do, and it is fine. But I don't think that it's good enough to... Like, this is just like filler to me. This is sort of where I see this as. I think it's a little hard to use. I think it kind of doesn't always do what you want. It doesn't come into like with an oil. Like you are going to be casting a decent number of non-creatures and whatever, but I need to be proven on this. But if this, like, you need to have another thing, right? This giving itself flying is not good. Like, that's not good enough. Like it just isn't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm low on this card. I'll have to be proven wrong on this. I think some others are going to be higher on this than I am. Next, Blade of Shared Souls, 2 in a blue for an equipment. It has 4 Mirrored End, which means it comes with a 2/2. And when it becomes attached to a creature for as long as you control, as long as this equipment remains attached to that creature, you may have that creature become a copy of another target creature you control. So the equipment itself doesn't really do anything other than make it so that you can copy one of your own things, but it has to be one of your own things, so it's not that great. Like, this is like 3 mana copy guy. right, in the late game. But then you have to so first of all, you have to have something you want to copy. And this also has to somehow be more efficient than just having a second one. Like if you have a thing you want to copy, what if you just had a second one instead of this card? Like that would probably be better in like 90% of the time, I think. The flexibility, like you're gonna pay 2 to copy your best thing, and then it's like, what if like you get blown out? Like you spend 2 mana to equip this to your guy, and then your opponent removes your thing, and you're just like, well, that sucked. I hated that experience. I don't know. Equipment's generally bad. The equipment that doesn't give any power and toughness without you already having something else on the battlefield is bad. But I think that the upside of this card is very high. Like you can, like in theory, you can be like, make 3 mana, make a copy of my best creature, and then I can keep copying like whatever my best thing is for the rest of the game. But I think that does not happen very often. So I'm out. Next, Blue Sun's Twilight. X blue for a sorcery, gain control of target creature with mana value X or less. If X is 5 or more, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Yeah, this is just phenomenal, right? This is just fantastic. So let's say you like pay X is equal to 3. It's a blowout, right? Like it's 5 mana, remove a 3-drop, and then you also get a 3-drop. That's a good card. That's a great card. So because even when you don't copy the thing, this card is fantastic. The upside of also being able to copy the thing makes it like really good, actually like really strong. So yeah, this is just a really good type of limited effect, and I think this is a good version of it as well. Next, Bring the Ending, 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller plays 2, or counter target spell instead if its controller has 3 or more poison counters. Ooh, yeah, sign me up for this. This looks fantastic. So I am going out a bit on a limb here, right? So with blue specifically, either this stuff all works and it's great. This is just a great card. Or it doesn't really quite get there, and then like your opponent sits on like 2 poison counters for the whole game, and you're just like, this is like useless in the late game. But man, yeah, like so this card is a great. It's a card that I love the design of as well, because in the early game, your opponent pretty much probably can't pay 2 extra to keep their spell in play, and in the late game, you're just going to be countering spells. So this scales with the game, which is the thing that I like about it. Typically, like the quench type variant falls off in the late game, but this isn't going to have that happen, I don't think. Especially because it's some of the other cards we'll see soon. I think this sort of like fits into this blue control-y archetype thing that I really am fond of. But yeah, I really like this card. Next, Chrome Prowler, 2 and a blue for a 3/2 flash. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. This is going to be a no thanks for me on this. The reason I really don't like this card is there's not... Like, what is the good gameplay pattern with this? Like, the actual best case like scenario that you can have happen is, like, your opponent attacks you with a Vigilance creature and, like, a 1/1. And you flash this in, tap down their Vigilance creature, eat their 1/1. Like, that's, like, the best... That's, like, the ceiling of this card. And that sucks, because it also just gets blown out. Like... You can't, like, the other thing you can do is be like, all right, flash this in, tap down your thing before attacks, but then you're not eating anything. You're just playing a 3/2 for 3. Now, does it interact with your, like, counterspell stuff? Yeah. But there's better things to do, you know? Like, there's better things to have that are instant speed than this, I think. Again, it's not even good, right? Like, what is it? Like, normally when you're holding up a counterspell, you want to be, like, drawing cards. You don't want to be, like, making a 3/2 that just kind of, like, sits on the battlefield and your opponent doesn't care about it at all because it just doesn't do anything. So, yeah. Next, Distorted Curiosity, 2 and a blue for Divination, except it could cost 2 less to cast if your opponent has 3 or more poison counters, which I think your opponent is going to have a lot. So this might actually be tier 2. The thing is, I'm starting it in tier 3, and the reason I'm starting it there is because I have some concern about about how this plays, right? Like you want this to be 1 mana early, and you don't really care about it being 1 mana as much late, right? And it's a sorcery, right? So that's the thing I don't love about this card. Now, obviously, 1 mana late is still good. It's still good. It's still better, and that's why this is not tier 4. This is tier 3. I just think that pure card advantage generally isn't fantastic. If you can get it online early enough, it's probably solid. The thing with this card, it's so tough to distinguish between this like being tier 3 and tier 2 for me. Like, is it an above average card in your deck, or is it just kind of like filler in your deck? I'm probably gonna draft it like it's like a tier 2 card, but I'm probably gonna I think it's gonna actually play like a tier 3 card. Is probably what's gonna end up happening with this card, because I'm gonna be like, oh, I want this to work, and then I'm gonna play with it and I'm gonna be like, it kind of doesn't really, because it doesn't interact with your instants. That's like this. The blue deck wants to play at instant speed, and this deck does help you do that in like the late game, but not in the early game, which I think is when you want it to do that. So I don't know. Next, encroaching microsynth. 3 and a blue for an artifact, non-land permanents you control, or artifacts. The same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield, so it makes all your stuff artifacts. I don't know. Like, it doesn't do anything. There's like, I don't bother with this. I'm not bothering with this. Next. Escaped Experiment, 1 and a blue for 2/1. When it attacks, target creature and opponent controls it -X/-0, but X is the number of artifacts you control. No, thank you. This is like not what blue wants at all. This is just like, so this and the cat. I'm like, these commons should tell you that blue has something absurd going on, because these commons are just unplayably bad, like just terrible. This is just so bad. Normally when you get a card like this, at least it has like vigilance or something, so it has like some redeeming quality about it that makes it playable. No, this is awful. This is just terrible. I don't like this card is just always bad. I don't want it. It's so bad. Yeah, all right. Yeah. No thanks. Like maybe if this had like toxic what, I don't know. No. Just don't, I'm not spending any more time on this. Next. Experimental Augury, 1 and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. Proliferate. Yeah, I'm really interested in this. I think this is really good. So it's Anticipate, but you get to Proliferate. That's something you definitely want to be doing in blue, and this plays really well with your 2-mana counter spell, and it plays well with another card we're going to see in a second. Blue has this kind of like 2-mana instant speed package that it can play, and this is a part of that in the mid to late game, and it's just a phenomenal part of it. So I think that's what Blue's trying to do. And I think it helps you find the cards that you want, it helps you find your lands, helps you find your spells. Impulse was fantastic in DMU, and I think this is going to be similarly fantastic in Phyrexia. Next, Eye of Malachor, 2 and a blue for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2. And when another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it becomes a 4/4 artifact creature until end of turn. So, no thanks. So no thanks from me. It's going to be a firm no thank you. Why is that? Well, it just, I guess you have the flash artifact that's unplayably bad. So you can play 2 unplayably bad cards together, and then you can have a 4/4 blocker. Or you can just play like a 4/4 that attacks sometimes. Yes, a lot of your cards are artifacts in blue, but all of those are bad. Like all of them, like we just saw 2 really bad blue, like common artifact creatures, and this ain't helping those. Like this ain't helping, right? This is not doing the thing. So I'm so out on this. The scry is like okay, it doesn't impact the board when it comes down on turn 3. Really bad, and well, it's actually not as bad in the late game because you at least are scrying, but like. I'm out on this too. Next, Font of Progress. 1 blue mana for an artifact that enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. You can pay 3 and tap it. Target player's mills X cards, where X is the number of oil counters on Font of Progress. So there is some mill stuff in the deck, and I think if you build around this card and you got like 2 of them, you could do the thing. You can do like the proliferate mill control deck. I think that's a deck. I think that is a deck you can build in this format, and you can be successful with that deck. Now, the question about that deck is, well, wouldn't I rather just proliferate and kill my opponent with 10 poison counters? And the answer is like, yeah, probably you would rather just do that. And this is like, so that's why I have this like build around here. Like this, I have this as a tier 3 build around, and I think that's like sort of where it lies. I think it's mostly pretty bad. It does start with 2 counters on it, and like, if you somehow don't get like the poison counter stuff in your deck, you could do this as your proliferate reward instead, and I think it can work. But I'm pretty low on this to start. Next, Gitaxian Anatomist, 3 and a blue for 2/5. When it enters the battlefield, you may tap it if you do proliferate. So a pretty simple card. Normally this would be tier 4, because a 4-mana 2/5 is just unplayably bad, but I think proliferate is like that good that it is bumping it up a tier where I'm like, all right, maybe this is acceptable, right? Like this is like maybe acceptable because it's like you can do the proliferate thing, and if you needed to block, you could just play a blocker. I do think that in this set you can play a number of creatures, especially in blue, that don't attack, because you don't need to kill your opponent with damage. You can just proliferate and kill them. We still haven't gotten to the card yet that lets you do that, but we're almost there. This is a this sort of fits into that like the blue control-y package thing. But I think this is going to be okay. I think it's not going to be terrible. Basically, is sort of my stance on it. Next, Gitaxian Raptor, 2 and a blue for a flying 1/4 bird. It enters with 3 oil counters on it. And you can remove an oil counter from it, and it gets +1/-1 until end of turn. So it is Mistwalker, but it's free, in quotation marks, in the sense that it costs oil counters. Yeah, this just seems fantastic to me. Now, the fact that it's not an artifact is weird, because look at it. It's definitely an art. You can see on the art that it's an artifact, but whatever. Definitely an artifact bird. The types were too much, I guess, for this to be good. I actually think it's probably better as not an artifact, but whatever. Yeah, this is fantastic. This is just really, really good. It fits all the stuff blue wants. It eats proliferate counters very well. It threatens to block and attack. It threatens to do all the things. Yeah, it's just really nice. So I like it. Next, Glistener Seer. 1 mana, 0/3, enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. You can tap and remove an oil counter from Glistener Seer, scry 1. I'm going out on a limb here. This card is a tier 1 card. I think that this card is the best blue common. I think that this card is the most important common for any color in the entire set. I think that this card exemplifies what blue wants to be doing in the set so much that it is worthy of being in the top tier. Whether or not it actually performs at that win rate level, I don't know if it's going to get there. It's probably going to end up in tier 2. That's okay with me. I live with that. I am going to be picking this card like it is like the nuts, like it's the absolute nuts if I know I'm playing blue. So let me just sort of like walk you through what this card does. So first of all, it's a 1-drop. So it comes out on turn 1 in a lot of games. Like it actually happens a lot. People are going to say, well, what if you don't draw this on turn 1? Okay, like that happens. But a lot of times it does come down on turn 1. And even when it doesn't, like you play this on turn 5, right? It still is blocking. Like there's probably like a random 2/2 on the battlefield at that point. It still blocks that, and then you can start scry. And scry is actually better in the late game, so you can just start scrying away all your lands. This eats this like when you proliferate, it's just like, all right, now I've got an extra scry. Every time you proliferate for the rest of the game, you always have an extra scry. So this blocks your opponent's 1-drops, and 1-drops, as I've said, are the thing. That is the theme of this set. The theme of this set is that 1-drops are good, and you want them in your deck. Especially the white one and the blue one commons are fantastic. They're like really good. And so this prevents you from dying to 1-drops and prevents you from getting poisoned. That's a very important thing. This prevents you from getting poison counters on you, because it's got 3 toughness on 1. Nothing's passing through it. This blocks most 2-drops too, and it especially blocks all the 2-drops with toxic. So, like, this card, it does so many things that blue wants to be doing, and it helps protect you, and it's just perfect. It's perfect for what blue wants. And that's my soapbox. This is my soapbox card. I think this card is just unbelievable. I don't think I can like exaggerate how much I love this card in its existence. So that's my take on Glistener Seer. Next, Ichor Synthesizer. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 when you cast an non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. As long as it has 4 more oil counters, it gets +2/+7, can't be blocked. So like, this is fine. It's the better of the 2 drops in blue at common, for sure. I don't think that when you're blue, most of the games you're going to care about the thing where it's like attacking for 2. I think blue's game plan is like get your opponent to have poison counters and just proliferate them to death. But sometimes you're just going to sometimes you're going to need to do damage, and this does damage in the late game. It is going to be difficult for it to live to the late game. I think a 1/3 for 2 is like a little light, right? And it doesn't start with an oil counter, so you can't just proliferate it up there. You do actually have to cast a non-creature spell first. Now you're going to be casting non-creature spells in blue quite a bit, but I'm not as much of a fan of this card. I think it's fine. Next, Ichor Moon Gauntlet. 2 and a blue for an artifact. Planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate and -12. Take an extra turn after this one. And when you cast a non-creature spell, you may choose a counter on. Choose a counter on target permanent. Put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So it basically proliferates, but only for one thing. Yeah, it sucks. It's not good in limited. So we'll move on. Next, it is Jace, the Perfected Mind. 2 blue and a Phyrexian blue for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. +1 is until your next turn. Up to 1 target creature gets -3/-0. -2 is target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. And then -X is target player mills 3 times X cards. So a lot of times, like if your opponent has drawn 25 cards, so in a game of limited, your deck has 40 cards. You are starting, like, you draw 7, so you're at 33 left in your deck. So if your opponent has drawn a lot of, they have to have drawn a decent amount. But if they're at 15 or less cards, you just play Jason. It's like, all right, kill you. And it's like, okay. Or you could go like Jace +1, your thing can't attack, and then kill you. So this is probably gonna cause a lot of issues. That's sort of why it's so good. I think if you build around it, you can just have that ability, say, kill your opponent a lot. The other abilities are fine. I don't know if you want to play this on 3 or not. Like, this is one of those planeswalkers where I'm like, all right, do you want to play this as a 3-mana, 3 loyalty Jace that like you +1 and then you whatever? Like, you could just draw a card. It feels a little weird, but I'm sure this is just really good. Maybe it's not tier 1. Maybe it ends up being a tier 2 card, but whatever. I think it's just strong. So you're gonna like just lose to this coming down on like turn 15, and you're getting milled out. So that happens. It absolutely dominates control mirrors, but that's about it. That's Jace. Next, Malakor's Watcher. 1 in a blue for a 1/1 flying vigilance. When it dies, draw a card. I don't see this card as being especially relevant. So, like, you don't want the thing to die. I guess it jumps or whatever, but it never, like, that's not worth the card that you're paying for it. It doesn't, like, I don't know. Like, what are you doing with this? Nothing? All right, great, fantastic. Like, I don't know. I probably should have put this in tier 4. I don't care about anything that this card does. So, next. Meldweb Curator. 3 in a blue for a 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. I've put this in tier 4. It might actually be a tier 3 card. Go ask like Sam Black about it. He'll tell you about it. like somebody like this is for the shenanigans players. Like you can build like a combo where you're drawing your stuff every turn and you're just like giving your opponent a bunch of poison counters and whatever. Like maybe this is actually good. It it may fit into the blue like combo control sort of shell, which I think is definitely a thing that could potentially be real. So I don't know. I'm actually going to put it into tier 3. I'm making a physical note that I'm moving it to tier 3, but it's yeah, I don't know. Technically not card advantage. I guess it can get you back at draws, but the reason like, it does get you something back, but it has to have something to get back. So yeah. Next, Melbub Strider, 4 and a blue for a 5/5 vigilance vehicle. Enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it, or you can remove an oil counter on it from it, and it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. It has crew 3. So, like, think about it from this perspective, right? Like, if this were just a 5-mana 5/5 vigilance in blue, how good would that be? It'd be pretty good. That would be a pretty good card. You'd be like, yeah, blue getting a 5-mana 5/5 artifact vigilance, that's pretty good. How often is this that? It's not. It's just not that often. It sometimes happens, and you can crew it as like a backup plan. I just don't think this is blue care. Like blue isn't going to have the ability to crew this. Is the problem? Like blue is playing a bunch of like 0-3s and 1-4s. Like this never gets crewed by anything. So you basically only can use the oil ability on it, and you can't use it until you proliferate it, or else you basically just never get to do it again. I'm pretty out on this card. I just don't think it's good. So. Next, Mercurial Spelldancer, 1 and a blue for 2/1. It can't be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, and when it deals to combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. Yep, it's pretty good. It's not tier 1 in my opinion. I think it's not quite good enough to be tier 1, but I think it's solid. Just does nice damage. Deals damage. Yep. Does other stuff. It does other stuff. That's about it. Next, Mesmerizing Doze. 1 blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature, then proliferate. An enchanted creature does not untap during its untap step. So this effect is usually in tier 4. Proliferate is bumping it up an entire tier, which is hard to do, but I think that it's getting bumped into like still not that good, but playable tier of cards because of the proliferate. I think there are better ways to proliferate, but this is fine, and this is like bad removal. It kind of does just a couple of things poorly that you want to do with blue. And for that reason, it's tier 3. Next, a Mind's Apparatus. 3 and a blue for an artifact with flash. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on it. Instant and sorcery kills spells you cast. Cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on Mind's Apparatus. Sure, whatever. This is like a build-around card that normally sucks. In my estimation, yes, the proliferate thing does stuff, but there's not like any. I guess the X spells are sort of the biggest things you can do in this set, where it's like, oh, I played this huge instant and I get to cast it for like 4 mana instead of 8 mana. But yeah, this does nothing. And instead of just making the spells cheaper, you could just cast the spells, right? That's generally what this is going to look like. Is going to be like, well, I could have just cast these spells for the amount of mana that it cost me to pay this Mind's Apparatus. So, I don't know. I'm pretty out on it. Next, Minor Misstep. 1 blue mana for counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. Not for limited. This is for vintage, and it is not good here. Next, Prologue to Phyrexia, 1 and a blue for an instant. Each opponent gains a poison counter and draw a card. Now this is a card that I looked at initially and was like, this sucks. And then I was like, no, wait, this is incredible. And the reason this is incredible is because it plays very well with the counter spell, and it plays very well with the other draw spell. So like again, this is part of that 2-mana package I was talking about, where it's like, okay, if I need to counter your 2-mana thing, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll just give you a poison counter. And once you get a poison counter, it's like, okay, you only need to draw you only need to proliferate 9 times, right? It's 9 proliferates after that, and you're dead. And there's going to be decks, like blue decks, that have much more than that ability to proliferate in their deck or whatever. And you got these, and like this helps you do that stuff. I'm pretty high on this. I think this is good. Now it may suck. It may be really really bad, but I think it's good. I think it's good. I could be very wrong and be proven extremely wrong, and maybe this is just too slow, and blue can't, and white decks are just running over you, and that's probably happening. I think that is probably going to happen, like most likely to happen. But if the format is slower, this is going to be fantastic, and if it's not, if it's a fast format, this sucks. So leave that up to your imagination. Next, Quicksilver Fisher. 3 blue blue for a 4/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. Yeah, this is solid. It's a pretty good way to filter your stuff in the late game, in the mid game, mid to late game. It's a significant 4/3 flyer. That's very significant. So it's good. Solid card. Next, Reject Imperfection. 1 blue blue for 8. Instant. Counter target spell. If that spell is manually used, 3 or less, proliferate. Sort of my thoughts on this card are like, if this card is good and playable, blue is going to be pretty absurd as a color. I don't think it is going to be good. I think it's going to be playable. It's a counter spell. Whatever. I think that the Quench variant is much better than this, but it's fine. Doing normal counterspell things. I have no reason to believe it's going to be better than the normal counterspell things. So, yeah. Next, Serum Snare. 1 on a blue. Return target. Non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If that permanent had mana value 3 or less, proliferate. Yeah. Yeah, this is nice. This is nice. It's a good proliferate. Again, 2 mana. It sort of plays in the 2 mana instant speed interaction package that I think blue is going to be playing. I think that's sort of what blue does, is have this 2 mana instant speed interaction stuff, and fits right in. Fits right in. Triggers all your stuff. So that's all I got to say about it. Next, Tamio's Immobilizer. 3 and a blue for an artifact. Enters the battlefield with 4, count them 4 oil counters on it. And you can tap to remove an oil counter on it, and you tap target artifact or creature. So it's an icy manipulator that, if you have enough proliferate in your deck, is basically just free. And that's really strong. That's like really powerful. So it starts with 4, it starts with 4 taps. It basically starts with 3 taps. So it's like 3 turns to draw a proliferate card, and then you can just keep tapping down the thing for ever. Yeah. That's about it. Next, Tamio's Logbook. 2 and a blue, artifact. 5 and a blue to tap and draw a card. Its ability costs 1 less to cast for each artifact or each other artifact you control. No thanks. This is way slower than the divination and all the other stuff. This is just too slow. This is yeah, it's just not gonna work. I don't need to get into why this is bad. Do I? This is just too much mana, too slow to be drawing these cards. It's just not. It's not. Next, Technithal, Inquiry Dominus. It's dominating, baby. 2 blue blue for a 3/5 flyer. If you would proliferate twice instead. 1 blue blue, remove 3 counters from artifact creatures and planeswalkers control. Put an indestructible counter on this. Again, fantastic. Just like the white one. Really fantastic. Really good. Really strong. Does all the stuff. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about it. You can just see the card. If you put a 4 mana 3/5 flyer in limited, it would be pretty close to a tier 1 by itself. And so then it just has other text on it, and that's fantastic. Next, Thrumming Bird. 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. Now this can get out of hand really fast. This could be an enormous problem. If your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with this, it's oh, this thing is just putting a toxic, a poison. This thing basically just has toxic 1 a lot, and then also it does all of the cards. Are you seeing now why I like this blue 1-drop so much? Every card has proliferate, and the blue 1-drop just gives you infinite scries for every turn of the game, and also blocks something for the whole game. It's just oh my god, dude. How do you? If your opponent goes blue 1-drop on 1, it's what do you do? What do you even do then? What do you even do? You're I guess I got to remove that with my 2 mana hard removal. What? That's ridiculous. You don't want to be doing that. I don't know. Next, Transplant Theorist. 3 and a blue for a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And it can put stuff on the bottom of your library, which shouldn't come up ever, but sometimes does, I guess. Again, Sam Black, you should be asking him about this. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is like fine. Like the other artifact, you don't like the other artifacts aren't that good, so you don't really. I don't know how many of them you want to be playing, but this is good, ish. It's a little light on impact, but I think it probably is serviceable in most decks. Next, Trawler Drake. 2 and a blue for 0/0 flyer. It enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. It gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it, and when you cast an non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. This is going to get out of hand extremely quickly. The fact that it's 3 mana, it's only 3 mana. I know it's a 3 mana 1/1. I know, I'm aware it's a 3 mana 1/1 flyer that can't block. I know. But it gets out of hand so fast. Like if you cast this and you cast a non-creature spell that also proliferates, it's like, oh, okay, I now have a 3/3 flyer. So it's like, like that's just allowed now. So like, yeah, it only takes like one spell that also has proliferate, and it's just completely out of hand immediately. Yeah. So, yep, that's about it. This card it's not a block. It doesn't block. So if you're looking for cards that block, this does not do that. But I don't think that it needs to. I think that you should be building your deck in such a way that this is always just huge immediately. Like this is always an enormous threat to your opponent. Next, Unctis. Grand Metatect. So that's my pronunciation of the day there. Other blue creatures you control have, when this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1, and you can play a Phyrexia mana until end of turn target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other creature types. So it enables its own stuff and then does things. The body's fine by itself. Now the Hercule Master of whatever was not good in Brothers War. So a 3 mana 2/4 is not good. But this I think is much better. So it's an artifact lord that enables its own stuff. And you can like now technically you want to like you can only activate it as a sorcery, so like you can't like blow people out or whatever, being like, haha, you didn't block the thing, but it is free to activate. Doesn't tap. So yeah, I think this is gonna find it nice. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be solid. So next, Unctis Retrofitter. 2 and a blue for 2/3 toxic 1. Nice. When it enters the battlefield, up to one target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4 for as long as you control, for as long as this remains on the battlefield. That's really nice. That's really solid. Now, obviously, you have to enable it, right? Like, you have to be playing the artifacts. You can do the thing similarly to what you could do in Brothers War, where if you have like a thing that has, if you have that 1/1 flyer, you can turn it into a 4/4 flyer with this until it leaves the battlefield. You can just say, yep, this is now a 4/4. So that's really fantastic. It works well with so many things. You just have to be able to enable it. You have to have the artifacts. And I think you can. I think there are enough decent artifacts. There aren't a ton at common, but there are a decent enough number of them. Like this works really well with the skull bombs, right? Like later on that we'll see in a later thing. Yeah, this is very, very solid. Next, Vivisurgent's Insight. 3 blue for a sorcery, draw 3 cards, proliferate. I should probably put this in tier 4 instead of tier 3. I just want to have faith that it's like good. I don't think it's actually good. 5 mana, draw 3 just isn't, like, it just doesn't, there's so many game states where it just doesn't do anything. It just didn't matter. There's some where it matters, but the proliferate almost like doesn't do it. Like it doesn't do enough to be like, this is like kind of impacting the board. It's not impacting. I don't think that this is impacting the board. It is like a, if you can do the blue Omega control thing in this format, this will be good. If you can't do the blue Omega control thing in this format, this will be very bad and unplayable. So, yep, that's about it. The sorcery is tough, like really tough. It doesn't play well with all those other 2 mana instants I was talking about. And and this is the last blue card. Watchful Blister Zoa, 4 blue for a 4/4. It has flying, and it enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. When it dies, you draw cards equal to the number of oil counters on it. Yeah, no, I'm extremely out on this. Pretty much, like, I don't know, your opponent just goes, like, ignore this? Like, they just ignore this, right? Like, why is my opponent killing this 4/4 flyer? I guess it's blocking and then dying, but then, like, I paid 6 mana for a thing that just can't, like, imagine if this gets bounced. Like, oh my god. What do you, like, you invest, like, 4 proliferate things into this, and it's just, like, up, and it got bounced, and now it does nothing. I just don't. Like, what is this doing? It's so expensive to do nothing. I'm not feeling threatened by this. My opponent plays this on turn, like, 6. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever, who cares? And if you remove it, it's like, okay, fine. They got, like, they drew a card. If you remove it immediately, it's okay, fine. I got 2 for 1, and that's like I had the 4 mana 6/6 6 mana 4/4 flyer drew a card. I don't know. Whatever will I do about this? Like mega blowout, right? Like it just didn't. I don't know. Imagine this just gets like enchantment removal. It's just like so bad. It's just like the worst thing of all time. It's just completely just not good at all. Anyways, with that somber note on the end of the the blue cards, that's blue. I hope that the 1-drop common doesn't like take over the format maybe and just be absurd, because it might. That's it. So thanks for watching. If you liked it, there will be more set reviews hopefully in the future when I do other set reviews. Unlike the last set where I just skipped it because I just sort of was like, ah. Anyways, bye.